Hello and welcome to the Recruit Rockstars podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Hyman. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. And I don't care if your business is venture capital backed, private equity backed. I don't care if it's your mortgage backed. The hardest part of your business, let's be honest, is scaling your team, recruiting them, holding on to them, showing them the love. And I've got a guest today who's going to show us exactly how it's done. His name is Jay Klauminzer. Jay is the CEO of Raise, a fast-growing company based in my hometown of Chicago. Prior to joining Raise, Jay started his career at McKinsey Company. Doesn't get much better than that. Then he decides, well, I'm going to join technology company. He goes to Groupon, where he winds up leading over 1,000 people. We're going to talk a bit about that. And then joined Raise about a year and a half ago, where he now leads the business. So with all that said, Jay, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on. Why don't we start with just you? I'm just interested in you. How do you go from McKinsey to Groupon? Seems like a pretty big change, right? What led you to decide to make that change?
Yeah, consulting is not a career for everybody. And I had a long go at it. I spent almost 10 years at McKinsey, and I learned two big things there. The first is I had a passion for consumer businesses. That was all of my work. I did customer experience and figuring out how to deliver great experiences to my clients. So I learned that. And then the second thing I learned was I wanted to learn actually how to do it, not just consult on it. And I got to a point in my career where it was simply most of my work was focused on client development, not actually on solving the problem. And it was either I'm going to do this as a career or I'm going to go actually take a jump into business. And so that's kind of where I was at. And I happened to get a call one day from the COO at Groupon saying, we're going to go public at some point soon. We need some good operators and smart people. Will you join us? And I figured, super high growth startup, great chance to cut my teeth. And so that's why I made the jump.
And at the time when you first joined Groupon, like roughly how big was the business in terms of people?
I want to think globally. So we had just acquired my city deal shortly before. So that added another 20 or 30 countries to the platform. I think we had something like 2,000 employees globally, somewhere around there.
Got it. And at some point you were managing half of that many. I mean, you were managing a ton of people. So it's a bit of a rocket ship story that you were there for 6 years?
Yeah, a little over 6 years, actually.
What did being at a company like Groupon during such a tremendous growth period teach you about leadership and about adding the right people, getting the right people on the bus?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I rode the rocket ship up, took the roller coaster down, and tried to get up that second hill. And so the interesting thing was, at each one of those phases, you needed different people. The early rocket ship phase, you just wanted people who were scrappy, rolled up their sleeves, could put hacky solutions in to solve new problems. And, when we went public, it's a very different operator that you need. You need people who would understand how to run a business with process. And then as we were climbing back up, it was almost a mixture of those two, where you needed really good operators who could also think quick with a bias for action, run rough prototypes quickly so that we didn't waste a ton of time. And so throughout that, it was interesting that I had to change my recruiting profile, the people I was looking for. And also, when you hire different types of people, you realize that how to develop them changes significantly as well. So it was just a really good experience to, refine my skills at all phases of growth.
How did you learn how to hire? I mean, is that something at McKinsey that you learned, or did you kind of learn School of Hard Knocks, or where'd you pick it up?
A little bit of both. I mean, McKinsey teaches you how to hire for analytic horsepower for sure. And so I had that walking in. The rest of it was almost trial by fire. When you realize, I joked that the first 3 months at Groupon, beat the consultant out of me. It's not enough to be smart and build good PowerPoint decks when you're dealing with people, especially in a startup like Groupon where we had very young and experienced people. And so I kind of had to learn on the spot, and it changed over time. Ultimately, it became a really simple formula for me where I have a bar for analytic horsepower. Once you meet that, I'm testing for fit, ability to get things done, and a little bit of content expertise. And so I've kind of, the weighting on each of those has changed over time, but that's really my formula.
Got it. What does it mean to fit? How do you assess that? Right? That's the hard part. I think the hard part. How do you tell in an assessment and interview process if a candidate truly is going to fit your organization?
There are a couple of things. For me, there's two. The first is I know what the environment needs. So as an example, at a company like Ray's, which is super scrappy startup, venture backed, I know that we need somebody who's comfortable with ambiguity, can get things done quickly, and can influence across many teams. And so with that, it's really straightforward. I'll do behavioral interviews where I give them a very simple situation where, obviously at a company like ours, you have to get things done quickly, and oftentimes teams are misaligned. So tell me about a time where you had to do that. And I really dig deep. It's not just listening for their whole story. I'll pause and stop and say, okay, take me back to that meeting. How did you prepare for it?
Yeah.
And if they say, well, I just put together a deck with some data, that's one answer. Another would be, I really got in the mind of everybody I had to talk with, and I went and talked with them ahead of time, make sure we had alignment, and they actually are really demonstrating a skill that I think is necessary to a company like ours. Then I learned pretty quickly.
So you're really drilling into how they did it,
yeah,
and why they did it that way, as opposed to just tell me what you did.
Yeah, exactly. And that weeds out the people who are good at making PowerPoints from the people that are willing to, use their influencing skills across teams.
Would that imply that your interviews are longer than most?
It really depends. I think for my most senior hires now, I actually do multiple rounds. I'll do probably 3 or 4 rounds with just me. Realizing
let me make sure I understand. 3 interviews or 4 interviews, whatever it takes to finish with just you.
Yeah.
Is that because if you put them together, the interview would just literally be too long, or is there some other reason?
I think it's some other reason. Yeah, it would probably end up being a 2 or 3 hour discussion if we put it back to back, but I'd be okay with that as long as a potential candidate would. I think more for me is I like to test on a couple things up front and then pause and reflect and think about, as well as talk with some of the other people they've discussed with or met with through the process, and really evaluate, okay, what do we really need to know? And by the second, after the end of the second one, I frame that the third meeting is going to likely be mostly just for them. It's just as important that it's a fit for us as a company as it is for them. And so I turn that down. I literally say, look, my pencil's down. This is non-evaluative. Let's talk about you. How are you thinking about approaching the role? What are your thoughts on the team so far? And really turn it around on them. So that's why it ends up being multiple sessions. Is I want to make sure the fit is there for both of us.
You told me in the pre-interview that you probably spent 40% of your time on this stuff.
Yeah, I do, especially when I've got some big hires. I mean, here over the last year, I've turned over almost my entire executive team. And so you can imagine when I'm looking for somebody who's going to be really a partner to me, a peer, somebody who truly has a seat at the table, not just doing their function, but helping direct the company.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time. And, as opposed to a lot of CEOs or even senior execs, I want that first outreach to be done by me, especially for a very senior role. And so I do a lot of prospecting myself just to demonstrate, one, it's an important hire for me. So I want the personal touch, but 2, it's, it gives me a lens as to who the candidates are and what they're thinking early on in the process versus getting them 2 or 3 discussions down.
I find that fascinating, Jay. Tell the listeners how you do that. You said I do a lot of prospecting myself. Get tactical. How do you do that?
Yeah.
And how long does that take? And when are you doing this, on Saturday mornings at home, or in all your spare time?
Yeah, I'll give you the tactics first, and then we can talk about when. I mean, it's a combination of things. Sometimes we'll use a recruiter to do, basically I tell them what I'm looking for, and they'll do some of the LinkedIn outreach, et cetera, just to say, here's some of the candidates. Does this profile look good for you? And then I'll do the cold outreach. That's one example. Second is, for a recent hire that I'm actually working on right now, I actually did the full prospecting where I used LinkedIn as my primary tool and looking at similar companies in the area for people in that role or a role below it, and reached out and just say, hey, exciting things going on here. Let's talk. So I do quite a bit of that as well.
Yep.
And then I do quite a bit of a network search. Obviously, we're venture backed. I know quite a few people in the industry. So I'll reach out and say, hey, we've got this exciting opportunity. Who should I be talking with? And so those are probably the big 3 in terms of tactics. I prefer the second 2, by the way. Using recruiters is fantastic. We do it when we need to. It gives us tons of leverage.
It's so expensive.
Network. Yeah, it is. I mean, for a big role, you're talking a big number.
That is a big check. Absolutely. That should be like your last phone call, right?
Yeah. But as for when I get it done, it actually is just mostly mornings and evenings. I try to protect my weekends. I have a family. And so, I try to do it mornings and evenings. Sometimes I'll block out an hour or so during the day, but I try to think, when do I get messages on LinkedIn that I'll respond to? And it's not in the middle of the day. So it works out that I can bookend my days with it as well.
You mentioned earlier that you've made a lot of changes to the leadership team, and you also said at Groupon there was a lot of change with the roller coaster ride that you described.
Yeah.
That would imply that you're parting ways with people who've been with the business for a while, made contributions, loyal soldiers, etc. How do you make that change when it's really not necessarily an individual's fault or responsibility, but the business needs have changed? How do you do that in a way that protects the culture, protects everyone's integrity, makes them feel as good as possible, etc.?
Yeah, it is a tough one, and one that I've spent lots of sleepless hours on. I think the first actually starts with setting the culture of the company and being very transparent with everybody around where we're going and what we need to do that. And so I started at Raise about a year and a half ago. We really quickly, outlined very succinctly the company strategy and the skills and people we needed to get there. And so, one, you're just setting the tone. Like this is what the new bus looks like, and hopefully everybody has a seat. But it's okay if some don't. And then in the particular roles that we're talking about, I don't ever like to surprise somebody. So it really is a series of transparent discussions around, look, this is what the role's going to. I think you can get there. Do you think you can get there?
Do you want to get there? The
Do you
person may
want to
not
get
want
there?
to, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it may be over a course of 3-4 months where you jointly decide that maybe it's not right, and then we could come up with the great solution, where they can exit on their own terms. Either they transition nicely out, or we give them extra time to start looking for other roles, and I'm happy to be a referral in those cases. But it needs to be sort of a joint discussion where people are not surprised, because when that starts to happen, you know how small communities are. Like, the word gets out that you're ruthless, and
Yeah.
if anybody isn't like you, they're out, and I never want that to happen.
Right. So it's transparency. It's a little bit of go slow to go fast, right? You're kind of spending time to get the right people on the bus so that you can figure out where to take the bus.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you're looking for these characteristics other than competencies. I forget exactly what you called them, but fit or match or DNA, whatever. Are they consistent across your entire career, or have they changed from situation to situation? And if so, what are those characteristics at Raise that, regardless of role, you're always looking for?
Yeah, interestingly, they have changed over the course of my career, but if I knew now what I knew then, I think they would have been the same. And I think for me at Raise, and I'm probably going to not say the exact same words I said to start, but the first is there is a big fit question.
Yeah.
Can you work and thrive in an environment that moves at this pace? The
Comfort with
last is,
ambiguity, I think you
yeah,
said, and working
yeah.
across many teams. Yep.
And then the last one obviously is the competencies, but the middle part is a huge bias for action. Like, are you somebody who needs to have 100% of the data to make a decision, or are you comfortable with getting 60%, which is a signal, and it only takes you 10% of the time, and moving on that?
Because which not everyone is.
Yeah, you're totally. I certainly wasn't when I left consulting, and I just had to learn and refine that over time, realizing that you'll get so much more done, even if you make a few more mistakes. You just get so much more done. So there's that huge bias for action, and then there's the ability to influence. And it's not just influence your team; it's influence other teams, other leaders, but also the strategy of the company. I fully know I don't know the answer at all. I know bits and pieces. I have pattern recognition, but I need a team who's willing to say, no, this is the direction we need to go. And I really want that. And so by doing those 4 things, I feel like I got a pretty good feel on candidates through the process.
As you've brought in new folks to the team, what kind of cadence have you developed for communications? I've often found the best leaders have just some regular structure for communications, whatever those are, email, in person, phone, whatever, meetings. How does it work at Raise in terms of the let's call it the top table, or really the company at large?
Yeah. So I'll break it down. I'll start with company at large. It's really straightforward. We've got a monthly company all hands where we talk about probably more than my investors would like. We literally will go deep into the numbers, what's working, what's not working. 2 weeks after that, I'll do a company-wide newsletter where it's just kind of my thoughts, and we have other people as guest authors. Those are 2 big company-wide ones.
That's every month, essentially.
It's every month, yeah. Yep. And then once a month, we'll pull all of our people leaders together and give them any insights that they need to cascade through. So those are like the company-wide ones. Yep. And then with my team, I've got a weekly business review with all of our key leaders. Anyone that runs a function plus some others will get there and talk about where the business is going. And then individual functions will have their own either weekly business or monthly business updates, and I'll attend those. And then every week I have a one-on-one with each of my direct reports. So that's my cadence. It tends to work with me.
Welcome to the sexy life of a CEO, right?
Yeah, that's
Weekends on LinkedIn and meetings all day long.
Yeah, I mean, I try to protect a few hours because you need time to get work done. But I have a zoom in, zoom out approach where I generally give people leeway, and I feel like if we got the right team, you just trust them. I set direction and then get out of the way. But I'll zoom in and on one particular topic, and either my one-on-ones or the monthly business updates give me a chance to do that. And if everything's going well, I pull back out. And if it's not, then I know where to invest my time further. So that's kind of my cadence, and I've refined it over time, but I feel like that works best for me.
What's been your involvement at Raise in hiring and recruiting other than that top team? So how, if at all, do you get involved in recruiting beyond the leadership team?
Yeah, I have a push and pull. So the pull is really straightforward. I offer to help on any hire, and I ultimately approve every hire, not because I want to be a bottleneck, but because I want to make sure that they actually have that kind of fit and drive, and I think they can meet those 4 criteria I talked about.
Does that mean you're meeting all finalists, or you're?
No, I meet all finalists that are senior manager and above, but I do get all approvals, and I look through all the interview notes and flag anything that I have a question on.
Got it.
Most times my fears or concerns get alleviated, sometimes not. So that's my pull. Like, go ahead and pull me in. And then the pushes, as I mentioned, anyone that's a senior manager and above, I want to at least be involved somehow in the process, even if it's a simple coffee at the end to say, hey, how are you feeling about the company? Let me tell you my vision, where we're going. Just so that they can hear it from me first. And it just goes back. I mean, I want to know everybody that's here. I may not interact with you on a daily basis, but I spent my first month meeting with everybody at Raise. I wanted to get to know even everyone from our member services people, because they're talking real time with our customers all the way through my direct reports. I wanted to make sure I had that engagement. So I just I'm not a micromanager by any means, but I also feel like it's my job to set the culture and vision of the company. People should know who I am.
How many folks total are you at?
We have about 125 now.
Got it. And are they all in Chicago, or is this more of a distributed model?
The bulk are in Chicago, though we do have an office in San Francisco and an office in Poland, which are our tech hubs. We do have a few folks, especially on the biz dev side, that work remotely and work in their home cities.
Got it. Fantastic. Jay, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. It's incredibly difficult what you're doing, and I'm sure listeners that are leading businesses can understand how time consuming it is, right? And and it's kind of 40-50% of the job. So I give you a lot of credit. How can people learn more about Raise or get in touch?
Yeah, really straightforward. You can go to raise.com and learn all about us. You can obviously download our app in either of the app stores. And if they want to get in touch with me directly, it's really simple. It's just Jay, which is Jay at raise.com.
That is pretty easy.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing about being CEO. You get to pick your email address, right?
Yeah, that is a nice perk.
Jay, thanks for making the time.
Absolutely. Thank you.